Hello. Today, Sterling and I are going to analyze the second half of his debate with Cosmic Skeptic. The link to our discussion of the first half of the debate is in the description. So, Sterling, thanks for coming on again.
Thank you for having me on.
Welcome.
Awesome.
So we left off, we watched the first half, so we're going to pick up around 25 minutes into the debate.
Sounds
different people buying animal products or something like that share in this culpability. So I think that there's a clear, distinct difference. I don't see how you could get around that.
Perhaps you underestimate how much animal products £50 or $50 can buy you. I'm not sure if you understand the direct correlation that you can have. If there are websites you can go to, which if you type in how long you've been a vegan for, it will tell you exactly, statistically, how many animals you've saved, how many gallons of water you've saved, your environmental impact, because that's another thing to take into account, right, is that it's not just about the effect of not buying a product because of the animal that was directly harmed and tortured to get the food on your plate, but also the environmental effect of your choices, which, of course, the first victims of environmental catastrophe will be non-human animals. You've got to take a lot more into consideration than I think perhaps you are. But even if I'm willing to grant you this and say that yes, saving a certain amount of people is better or more direct somehow than refusing to pay for people to put pigs into gas chambers, which I don't think is true. But even if that's the case, sure, but that doesn't change the obligation that we have on putting pigs into gas chambers, right? I would put it this way: if I were asking you, right, if I said that I'm a human being, let's just change out because if we're killing a pig for taste pleasure, right, we're talking about sensory pleasure. And so if I just switch out the sense pleasure, if I say that I'm doing it for my hearing, right, I really like the sound that a pig makes when I put it in a gas chamber.
I'm trying to remember how much of this argument he made yesterday, but it sounds like I think he's already kind of said this. It's just going back to for taste pleasure, and he brings up hearing, but again, it's the same thing. It's it's not just about taste.
right.
So,
Well, there are a multitude of factors, right?
Yeah, so I feel like he's kind of repeating himself here, but
Definitely,
yeah.
because he wants to force the point, right? He's trying to.
Yeah.
This is kind of the thing. You batter somebody with language, right? You just say,
Right.
well, it's a
Taste
gas
pleasure.
chamber. It's gas chambers.
Yeah,
it's pigs in gas chambers.
Yeah.
And it's
never
okay,
finished,
it's
I'm about to pay somebody to lower a pig into a gas chamber and film it for me so that I can listen to the squeals, right? Would you say that I have an obligation not to do that?
I don't see how that relates to veganism directly.
Because that's exactly what we're doing when we go into a supermarket and we pay money across the counter, economically demanding the pig be put into a gas chamber.
Pause. So the point that what I was trying to make, I should have elaborated a little bit, but what I meant was that there's nothing inherently that factory farming has to do with veganism, right? We're talking about veganism right now. Just because there are factory farms and they have unethical practices doesn't mean that we adopt veganism, right? When there's an unethical practice in any kind of industry, what we do is we try to eliminate the unethical practice from that industry via the best methods we have, right? And in order for him to prove that we should just not eat any meat, including any meat that is from family farms, from any non-factory farmed meat, he would have to show empirically why that would be the case, or why that's implied in some kind of later moral reasoning. And he doesn't.
Right.
He never does the whole debate.
I feel like his argument is basically, his claim is we have a moral obligation to not buy bacon from the supermarket. And someone who's not a vegan could even grant that and say we do have a moral obligation to not buy bacon from the supermarket, but still say we don't have a moral obligation to go vegan.
Right.
So he doesn't really addresses that. He kind of just redefines veganism, and then his argument seems to be don't buy bacon from the supermarket.
Exactly. Premise one, factory farming is wrong. Premise two, veganism. I don't understand.
I don't really follow.
Yeah.
But
That is what's happening. That is what you do when you put the money across the counter.
So are we actually going to move into a different one of the arguments? I think we're talking about now into more like number two.
We sure can, but this isn't an interview. It's a debate, I think. And so in that case, I think that you should respond to my argument too, which is this: if you go into a supermarket and you pay money for a piece of bacon, right? That piece of bacon will have come from a factory farm if you got it from a supermarket. And what that means is that you are economically demanding that a pig be put into a gas chamber. Or I shouldn't speak for the US. I mean, in the United Kingdom, 25% of pigs are stunned, so to speak, and killed by lowering them into a pool of CO2. They're lowered in pairs in a metal crate, which acidifies the liquid in their eyes and their mouths and causes them to spend the last 30 seconds of their lives choking on carbon dioxide and desperately trying to escape. Now,
Yeah, it's
that's
like,
what
it's an hour-long
happens.
debate.
Yeah,
Right? Debate here.
yeah.
That's what
it's like-
happens
Get to
when
the
I
point.
pay for a bit of bacon, right? That's where it comes
Right.
from. That's what I'm
So,
economic.
but wait a minute. Okay, so where you're trying, but the problem is that again, so one, the moral culpability is spread out. Again, it's not one piece of bacon equals one pig dying in a gas chamber, for one. Like that's not how it works.
I shouldn't
why,
buy
why
his-
are these,
I shouldn't
why are
buy
these
his
pigs being loaded into
vocabulary,
gas
but I do
chambers?
there.
Why does it happen?
So,
'Cause it's
and
not
again,
technically,
so when
like-
we're talking,
A gas chamber. I don't know. Like, what's the definition of a gas chamber?
Right.
But
Well, it's more the
it sounds like-
connotations, right? Like it's like it's the problem.
the Holocaust
Yeah.
connotation, probably. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's another. Like, I know PETA had some ad that was like, however many Jews died in the Holocaust, but this many animals die in factory farms. So he's kind of dangerously close to,
Yeah.
like, if he wants to make that argument. Like, there's another video where he basically says like, animal suffering is like worse than slavery. So he doesn't really bring that up in this video, but he has gotten into like he has made those kinds of statements before.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure he believes it.
I'm just telling you what
you're
happens.
making assumptions that I think, for one, that pigs are equivalent to any other type of animal. Like that, I believe that we should be killing pigs rather than. I mean, I think that it would be perfully.
I don't
okay
remember saying
to
that.
kill fish or something like that. But you used the example of pigs.
I
So
did.
again, and I did present actually in my opening case for the subject of a life hypothesis, which pigs would be an example of that. So can you use a different example from that wouldn't be a subject of a life? Because I think they'd be perfectly okay for that if they weren't if they weren't like something that had. So if something doesn't have beliefs, desires, perceptions, psychophysical continuance. Yeah, I think that'd be fine.
Right, but the thing is, you're misunderstanding because if
And also,
veganism
it
is
makes the assumption that you purchase it from a factory farm too. I'm sorry, I should have said that.
no, I said you purchased it from a. Okay,
Local
but
farmer?
I said that you purchased it from a supermarket. This is what I
Oh.
specified.
Yeah.
I also made no comparisons to any other animals. You can value any animals on whichever scale you like, but here I'm talking about pigs because what I'm saying is this: if the definition of veganism is about the minimization of suffering and exploitation, if you take an animal.
So there he just said it, right? Like minimizing the exploitation and pain is what he said. He just said again, and so that what does that reduce down to? That's going to reduce down to negative utilitarianism,
Yeah.
right? It's because
Like,
people
it
don't
should
agree
just
what
debate.
animals are. Like that's the whole point. That's the
Right.
point. If we have like nobody are, and this is I've gotten to arguments about this on my channel, like by people posting. Nobody ever argues that like pigs aren't sentient or like
Right.
that cows aren't sentient. Like they obviously feel some sort of pain. They obviously have like some kinds of characteristics, right? But that's not what the argument's about. The argument's about what we value morally. You can agree that, like, for example, like just pretend that I think that all factory farms are okay, like whatever, and I think that all this kind of stuff, all the kind, like the hardcore carnist type of mentality. You can eat whatever
Right.
you want. There's no moral consequences. There are plenty of people who, like, I'm thinking of like philosophers like Tim Hassau and other people like that, who will say that, and they'll still say, and then they'll grant all these characteristics to animals: sentience, pain, things like that, suffering. But their point of contention is on the animals, right? Like what the animals have moral worth or not. And so you can easily like have these kind of range of positions. He tries to ignore it, right? He tries to say, if you think any animal suffering is relevant, then you're an ethical vegan, and like that's obviously not true. I don't think anybody thinks that all animal suffering is irrelevant.
Right. He kind of like there was like another video I watched of him where like he's saying he got his friends to like read, I think it was Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, where like the first chapter is just about how like animals have moral value. Then he was saying he got his friends to read that and a lot of them went vegan. It's like it seems like that's just like that's a big jump from animals have moral value to veganism. It's like it seems like for some people it's like his argument is if all you have to do is say they have some moral value and that obligates you to go vegan, and that just seems like a huge jump that he doesn't really justify.
Exactly, I agree, and
that you think are necessary for an animal to be exploited, then they wouldn't fall under the definition of veganism. Right?
Okay,
They'd be
so
an animal, but they wouldn't be suffering, so that wouldn't matter. What I'm asking you is this:
Well,
in
that's
at least
the
some
definition of
instances,
veganism, I guess.
Yeah,
it just
let's
says,
bring it to the
it does not
redefining.
say anything about whether the animals are fish or whether the animals are. Okay.
it
Sure,
says
sure.
a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for yada yada yada, right? Which means exploitation of and cruelty too. If you have an animal which is not capable of experiencing cruelty and exploitation, then you can do whatever you like to it and it's still vegan, because to be a vegan is to eliminate the exploitation and the cruelty, not just to eliminate the use of animals in some vague aspect. That's the definition of veganism. So I'd still like to hear an answer to my question, which is this. Even if all this commits you to is that in some cases there is a moral obligation, if you go to a supermarket and you pay that money, right, I believe that I have an obligation not to do so, because when I pay for that to happen, I am economically demanding. Even to use your terms, I'm contributing to an economic demand for a pig to be lowered into a gas chamber. What I'm saying is, if I did the exact same thing, but the pig was being lowered into the gas chamber because I liked the way it sounded instead of me liking the way it tastes, that it would be uncontroversially true that I have an obligation not to do so, that you'd think me a moral monster if I thought in any way I had the right to demand a pig to be lowered into a gas chamber because I liked the way that it sounded. And yet that is exactly what we do. That is exactly what we do when we go into a supermarket and we hand some dollars across to the cashier to give us some bacon. And I'm asking you, do you think it is an obligation to not torture a pig for sensory pleasure, or do you not?
Okay, so a pig, yes, I would agree that you shouldn't torture pigs for sensory pleasure.
And that's an obligation?
Yeah, I think that's an obligation to not torture pigs for sensory pleasure. But again,
well, thanks for coming, ladies and gentlemen.
No, because I'm not going to concede that, for one, all killing of animals is torturing for sensory pleasure. I'm not going to concede that that all products have to be produced that way. I don't think that even killing certain animals would be wrong for sensory pleasure necessarily.
Yeah, me neither.
And then a philosophy or a way of living. So there's just a problem. You're trying to squirm out of the definition, but no vegans eat fish. Nobody would consider you a vegan.
This is my problem. This is my problem, right? I shouldn't have said eat. Like this is why like everybody jumped on me. Like when I say eat, then I'm starting like to sound like I'm talking about dietary veganism, right? Like and there like there's some kind of distinction.
When you said eat, in what sentence?
I said no vegans eat fish is what I said, right? And like I should have been clear. I should have said that no vegan could believe that eating fish, or purchase, right? Could believe eating fish would be ethical. That's what I should have said. Or believe that purchasing fish would be ethical. That's what I should have said. Just kind of like so that they didn't think I was equating like what people actually do with what they believe. Like, and that's why people.
It's really about, because it sounds like he's saying even if he doesn't personally eat fish, he's saying a vegan could purchase fish.
Right, and he's going to say like something about roadkill later. Right, because and obviously I can agree with that, right? You could believe that killing animals is wrong and like eat roadkill, for example, but you couldn't believe that buying fish that was purchased in a farming situation, or even like a more extreme example, eating a burger that you know was factory farmed. You couldn't believe that was ethical and still be a vegan. And he's going to ultimately argue that it is. Which is insane, but okay.
And so this is kind of the swerve you're trying to do. So I don't think that fish are a subject of a life. And so I don't agree with the definition of veganism. But no reasonable.
I should also maybe drop the subject of a life here. And, no need to pause.
That means that you can still call yourself a vegan if you don't consider them a subject of a life. Nobody would say that. That's a silly argument.
No, look, you're misunderstanding that.
I don't think that they.
Your disagreement is not with veganism. Your disagreement is with the definition of the terms used in the definition of veganism. For instance, if we were arguing about the exploitation of humans, if I said we had no obligation not to exploit humans, and for some reason I thought that black people were exempt, I was a racist, and I said that I'm.
This is what made me bring up when he was talking about slavery. It's like he really shouldn't bring up like wherever he's going with this, with like bringing up black people and racism, if he's going to say animal suffering is worse than slavery. It seems kind of hypocritical, but
true.
It's like not really. But yeah, anyway.
That we shouldn't be exploiting humans. And I said, yes, I just don't consider them to be humans. It's like, I'm not disagreeing with the principle there that it's wrong to exploit humans. I've just got it wrong when I say that.
So I think that this is like another thing. I just thought about it now, but it's how could you agree and believe in an argument where you think that the terms in the argument are wrong? Right, it seems like it would be so. Like what he's saying is like, well, you just disagree with the terms that are defined in like veganism. But if I think that those terms are wrong, then I'm still disagreeing with veganism because I'm disagreeing that those terms are consistent. I'm saying that those are inconsistent.
Right. So is he saying he disagrees with the definitions of the terms in veganism, or he's saying
I do.
You do.
He's saying I do. He's saying that in in my like in the philosophy, which a way of living, blah blah blah, it forms the cruelty to animals, right? He's saying that in that definition, right, that the term animals just means and it's a vague term, right? It's just a term that means that animals that can be exploited. And he's saying that my definition of that is that, and what I'm trying to say in this tape is that no, what that is referring to is animals that are sentient, animals that can suffer, right? And he's saying, well, you don't actually have a disagreement. You just disagree with the definition. But if I think that the definition in the term is wrong, right? Like I'm saying that that's not a consistent definition with the whole, with the entirety of the, like, because there's like two parts right here. I'm saying that's inconsistent. Then that means that I do have a disagreement with ethical veganism. I couldn't adopt something where the definitions in the term are inconsistent if I don't think it's true, or I don't think that that's what that means. I don't think that's what animals mean.
Right. I think Alex might be getting too caught up in language here. Like if you think about it, like just imagine there's like some like platonic form that is veganism. Like it doesn't matter how you define the terms in the word veganism. The point is there's that platonic form or whatever.
Right.
And you either agree with the principles there or you don't. So
precisely.
Is it really worth getting all caught up in words? The point is, do you agree with that, the principle there, the meaning behind it? Mm-hmm. If you're disagreeing on words. But and I think though I wonder if he's saying, is he not saying it's not about how you define animals? Is he talking about exploiting? He's saying only exploiting means to cause to suffer, so only animals that can suffer can be exploited. I guess that's kind of
it's a little vague, right? Like what does exploitation mean?
Right. He's assuming exploited means cause to suffer, as in cause, and he's saying only conscious beings can suffer. But I don't.
I would agree with that.
That's what most vegans mean.
Well, I mean, like, go ahead. I'll let you talk.
Like, I don't know. I think for most vegans, when they say like you're exploiting animals, they don't really. They're saying even if the animal's not conscious, it's just the idea of using it for food or clothing or anything. Well, that's exploiting it, even if it's not conscious. Maybe that's not. That might be a bad definition. I'm just saying that most vegans, I think, would say even if the animal's not conscious, it can still be exploited. But maybe not.
Well, let's say that they don't, right? Let's just pretend like they don't, and the animal means conscious, right? Well, okay, but there's a certain class of animals that you could say are conscious, like have sensation, like fish, for example, or like you could argue like some vegans do argue this, so I'm not straw manning them. Like bugs, some people think that bugs have some kinds of sensation, right? So that would fit into their definition, and I think, and obviously there are tons of people who would agree that like fish feel something, have some kind of consciousness, even if it's a very small amount, like a very small amount. And they would still not be vegans. They don't have to be vegan just because they believe that. That's not what it means to be vegan. Like, so I can agree that maybe, like, I can agree that there is such a thing as causing pain to a fish without saying that fishes deserve all moral, like moral consideration. And at a high level, or that they have a higher level of moral consideration than humans, for example, or at the same level, I should say, not a higher level.
Right.
But there's obviously a gradient here, and I don't know when we get into it. I wish, like, it seems like the more relevant thing would be to get into that name the trait thing and get in that argument. I don't know when we do. We get into it like very small amount, but yeah.
I think you bring it up. He he says something that basically sounds like name the trait. You say, "Isn't that name the trait?" And he's like, "No."
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he just wanted to say no to you, but. Yeah, it sounded like name the trait to me, but yeah, I'll get to that soon.
Wrong about that, right? I don't disagree with the principle that it's wrong to exploit humans. I've just misunderstood what it means to be a human. In the same respect, if you say something like, well, look, I think it's wrong, we have a moral obligation not to harm certain animals, but I think that other animals don't fall under that category because of X and Y reason. It's like, you're not disagreeing with the definition that it's wrong to exploit animals. You just don't think these animals are being exploited because they're not subjects of life. You still agree with the proposition that if they did fall under that category, that it would be wrong to exploit them. And that's all veganism is. Veganism is the proposition that if an animal can be exploited, if it is the kind of animal which is subject to that experience, of which it's capable of exploiting and suffering and committing cruelty against, that we should not do so. And that's what you're agreeing with. That is just the definition of veganism.
Okay, so I completely disagree with that. I think that's one of the silliest arguments I've ever heard. In terms of, you can't say that you're a vegan. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice with dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, I could have pressed him on this. Maybe I should have. I shouldn't. I don't know. But the whole the debate resolution is ambiguous, right? It just says veganism. It doesn't say dietary or
Right.
ethical veganism. So I could have said, well, the debate definition is ambiguous. I gave the definition as the Vegan Society's definition, and the Vegan Society's definition has explicitly, in dietary terms, it denotes dispensing with all products derived partly or wholly from animals. And that would have been enough, right? Like that, I should have just, I
Right.
could have forked him down with that. He agreed to the definition before we started talking. So I could have been like, well, okay, the debate resolution's ambiguous. You agreed to this definition. You need to defend dietary veganism. But I didn't out of charity.
So he agreed to dietary veganism?
He did, because that's in the Vegan Society's definition. It's
I couldn't tell if he was saying, was he ignoring the second, because there were two sentences, right? Was he ignoring the second sentence, or did he agree to the second sentence?
He agreed to the second sentence. I gave it to him
Oh.
beforehand.
Oh, yeah, so he's just, I think he realized, like, that got him in a tough spot, so he just kind of abandoned the second sentence.
Exactly.
Not,
And I could have pinned
the
him down. I
definition,
just
but-
wanted to be charitable. Like, I just wanted to say, okay, let me
yeah, I
argue.
mean, I think that was, right, I think he basically realized, I don't know if, yeah, I think I'm still surprised that I guess he agreed to the second sentence, because he did, like, you read it, or he read it in the beginning. One of you did, and he didn't say anything then.
And I sent it to
And now
him
he's-
beforehand, too. Like, I sent him,
This whole two sentences.
yeah, the whole thing, the complete definition.
Oh, he agreed to that?
Yeah.
Oh, so how did it...
Because he wanted to
Yeah,
screw
I
him
don't
out. It
think-
doesn't put him in a good
Yeah, he
situation.
realized, like, he can't defend, like, ants, the killing of ants. So then he just left it, but it's like he shouldn't have agreed to it then.
Yeah,
But-
exactly.
yeah, but at least, yeah, it was nice that I think it would have, at least you got to move on to a different topic. Like, you could have just kind of, like, said you agreed to the definition, but I think it was nice to just let the debate move on to something else.
Birds are animals. I just don't think they're a subject of a life. So I think that it would be I think that we would be allowed to eat them, right? So
well, look,
okay.
I mean, who's
okay,
doing
and now,
the
one
serving
second,
now?
I'm still explaining. Okay, so that's what I think. Now, no reasonable person would say, yes, a vegan can eat fish and birds. When we talk about dietary terms, that's just what vegan means. I mean, it literally says it in the definition.
I thought we were
So
talking
I
about the
think-
ethical definition.
So, and I'm
But then why did he
agreeing,
agree to the
and I'm
dietary?
saying
Yeah,
that
exactly.
I don't know.
these things are animals, and that part of the definition, at least this is what the Vegan Society says, and I've never met a vegan who would say that eating fish and birds, you can still call yourself a vegan. It seems like that's completely insane.
Again, I shouldn't have said
But
eat.
do you?
I should
so
just
do
say
you
purchase
are
or
you just
believe.
granting the second
Well,
premise?
I mean,
Or the
you're
second
welcome.
contention, though? I'm asking. I'm
You're,
just asking
you're
if
welcome
you
to
are
that
first.
opinion. You're welcome to that opinion if you like. I remember. I
Let's
hope
have
the
a
audience.
pause. So, this is kind of and I just want to say I appreciate you bringing me on. Reviewing this debate gives me a lot of like tips for myself to kind of like, make more clear in my words, right?
And you have another one on Saturday, right?
I do,
So
yeah.
I'll put the link for that once
yeah,
it's up.
definitely. Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I'll watch
Heck
it
yeah!
live.
Okay, I appreciate it. I need some support. Well, I think that Ask Yourself is going to be a lot easier in terms of he just doesn't have as a huge a fan base. It's not going to be like 300K versus.
Right, and I would say overall, Alex is better. I don't know. I was gonna say better. I guess he's a better debater.
He's a better orator. Like he speaks better.
Yeah.
He seems like a more likable person. Like I don't think that.
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, I would say more likable from what I've seen of.
I
Ask
don't think
Yourself,
his
but-
arguments are like. I think that his argument. Let me rephrase that. It's not that I think his arguments are bad, and I think they're wrong. But how do I phrase this? His arguments are less philosophically rigid. They're more emotional. They're very rhetorical. They're very like this. They sound really
Alex
nice.
or Ask Yourself.
Cosmic Skeptic. Yeah, Alex.
Okay.
So
he's more
rhetorical.
emotional.
It
you said.
sounds good. Like it sounds good. Kind of like
Right.
feels good.
Yeah, it's kind of like Christopher Hitchens. Like I don't think he really had any good arguments, but he just kind of.
You like it though. You like to
Yeah.
hear him. He's like, okay, you sound.
Yeah,
cool.
it's like you want to agree with him, but then like if you really think about it, it's like, yeah.
My opening statement that the veganism I'm advocating here is not a dietary veganism. Right? I agree with you that the definition of being a dietary vegan is just to not eat animal products. But people might be doing that for health reasons. They might be doing that for environmental reasons. They might be doing that for any reason under the sun. But I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is the exploitation of animals. I'm talking about the ethical definition of veganism, which is about the elimination and minimization of cruelty to animals. And so if you want to switch to the dietary definition, then you go ahead, but we won't be in disagreement. That of course there are animal products which I think it's ethical to eat. Absolutely.
let me
Because I
ask
don't
you
care
a
about the
question.
fact that it's an animal product. I care about where it came from.
So I've watched a lot of his talks to kind of transition into this, and I have never. This is kind of a personal comment about him, but I know for a fact, based on those types of interactions, that he doesn't eat any animal products, and he doesn't use any animal products in his daily life. So
he's saying, I guess he's an ethical vegan, which also causes him to be a dietary vegan.
yeah, exactly.
You could say.
And I'm like, and so I'm just wondering why he won't stick on the definition. Why won't he defend fish then? Isn't he like doing them a disservice? If he really thinks that they're morally wrong, he needs to argue against it and say the reason why he thinks they're. It's kind of like if he was like an abolitionist, right? If he was an abolitionist for black people, he should be arguing about their humanity when somebody says they're not.
I don't understand. If you think that's too far, but what vegans eat fish or think it's okay to eat fish?
Yeah.
So why is he so afraid to just say it's wrong to think you can eat fish? I don't know why. If he doesn't eat fish himself, I don't know why he's so hesitant to say that.
Me either. I'm curious what his trepidation's about. Maybe he doesn't think he can defend it. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
But oh well.
Have you had any contact with him after the debate?
I haven't though. He hasn't mentioned the debate at all. Like I'm surprised he didn't like share it or like. But
maybe he wasn't happy with how it went. I don't know.
Yeah, it certainly didn't. I mean, like I don't know if he expected me. I think I could be wrong. I think he expected me to come out with like kid gloves, being like people can eat meat because it tastes good, but bacon though. Or
he thought you'd be like a Dillahunty or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, because I never heard of you, so yeah, maybe he just like didn't really look you up. Because well, the other thing was like I don't know. Did he like know of any of your like your blog or channel or anything? Or
he did. I did send him that.
So he could have like realized that you weren't just going to be another Dillahunty, but it just seems like he's kind of unprepared. You just kind of came up with the same arguments and wasn't really ready. And you haven't really read anything about veganism, but he should have at least realized that it wasn't going to be another Dillahunty debate.
Right, and I tried to send him like a basic layout of my argument, like, and maybe he didn't read it or he didn't care, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just the way it is, I guess.
But all animals, except for cows, are not part of that definition. Like, there's no exploitation of anything except for cows. Would I still be a vegan?
I would think that you were wrong, but I think that you would still be agreeing with the vegan.
Why did he just say you wouldn't be a vegan?
I know he doesn't. He just wants to really
disagree about definition.
He really wants
because I think that
to
in
not
order
have to
to
defend it. He wants to really not have to defend it.
You have to believe that animals, in general, like even, I mean, I just don't see how you can say that. Or what about humans? Yeah, let me go to that too. What if it was just humans? Like that's the only type of animal that I think that you can use and exploit. Would you still be a vegan?
But well, I think you're just
like if you sorry, let me. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right, because the thing is, if we understand veganism to mean the same thing, which we apparently do, or did at least up until
you change your definition,
diet,
right? Exactly.
That it's about the elimination of suffering and exploitation. Then the reason that you would give for excluding certain animals from that consideration would be because they can't be exploited and they cannot experience cruelty. So you might say, for example, you might take the route of Descartes, or someone like C.S. Lewis. You might say that animals can't feel pain, right? And so yes, I agree. Eliminate
first vegan Descartes apparently now. That's what.
But he said.
Oh my.
He was saying that Descartes didn't think animals were conscious. Is that what he was saying?
Yeah. He didn't think they were conscious. I mean, that's fair.
He didn't think they were conscious.
He didn't.
Yeah, I guess if you're like, I mean, I could see how theists could, you could just imagine that God only gave souls to humans and only people who have souls are conscious.
Right.
But I read The Problem of Pain, so like there was a chapter on animal suffering. I'm trying to remember, like, I don't have it with me now, I got it from the library, but like, did C.S. Lewis explicitly say animals can't feel pain? Is that what, did you read it?
I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time since I've read The Problem of Pain.
I don't think it was that simple. Like, I wish you could just like provide a quote.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think it was more just C.S. Lewis was just kind of discussing the possibility of it. I don't know if he ever explicitly said animals. I don't think he ever said animals can't feel pain.
Right. I don't think that.
Maybe I don't know. I don't have it with me to reread it, but that seems like I wish you could at least like give the quote he's referring to.
Right.
But,
right.
I don't know. But I mean, at the same time, it doesn't really matter because the point is he's talking about the view that animals can't feel pain, and we don't take that view anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant.
It's true, but let's pretend that we did, right? Because let's pretend that we think that no animals feel pain besides humans, right?
Right.
But you would still be an ethical vegan, right? I'm still an ethical vegan. I just think.
Then you would just be really dumb. Like I don't
Yeah.
get why. He's like, why is he afraid to say those types of people aren't vegan?
I don't understand.
So the kind of people who are like, animals can't feel pain. I don't know. I just can't wrap my head around that they're still ethical vegans. But I don't know.
That's silly.
Animals, but you might say, as C.S. Lewis did, that because other animals can't suffer, that I therefore don't have an obligation not to kill a pig, right? It's like, okay, the problem there is not one of veganism, because you're agreeing with the principle, the moral principle, that we should eliminate suffering where we can, right? The problem there is that you just mischaracterize what can and can't feel pain, it seems to me, right?
Okay.
That's not a problem with veganism, that's a problem with your understanding of animals and their nature.
So what I'm gonna say is this: you're essentially casting negative utilitarianism as ethical veganism.
This is what I was already thinking. So once you said that, I was so happy.
Somebody agrees with the principle
of
negative utilitarianism. They are like that's just what it means to be a vegan. That seems like what you're saying.
Well, I think they're committed to being a vegan. Yes, veganism
no,
is
well,
a
I'm saying
extension.
that they seem equivalent, because if you just agree with any type of suffering that's morally relevant, that's equivalent to saying that all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food. It's just that you're saying that those terms are so flexible that they can mean almost anything. And if they can mean almost anything, like animal can mean almost anything, then it's just equivalent. It's just like it's a literal tautology, or not tautology, but they're just the same statement. Ultimately, it's like it's a way of living which seeks to include, as far as practical and possible, all forms of exploitation. You could stop there, because all moral agents are, included in those forms of exploitation. They're assumed by there even being such a thing as exploitation.
In so many words, what I'm saying. Look, if you agree with
what extra work
the
is and cruelty to animals doing? What kind of extra definitional work is it doing?
Well, I think that most people interpret animals in that definition to mean non-human animals, but that's up to you if you want to interpret it that way or not. If you do, then we have a useful definition, which essentially is that it would be similar to being an advocate for women's rights.
I like how he brings up all these different things because he thinks it's going to get an emotional reaction. First it was gas chambers to allude to the Holocaust. Then it was black people, and now it's women's rights. It's like if he could just get those people on his side, but it's just kind of funny. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't laugh at it, but I don't really like that strategy of just like bringing up emotionally charged examples.
It's intellectually dishonest, right? It's like you have.
Yeah, it's not. I don't even see the analogy. Like, I guess. I'll let. We didn't really get to the end of what he was saying there, but I don't remember what his point of that was.
Yeah.
But
here, let's let it finish real quick, and then we'll pause.
Yeah, we'll see.
Context. In the same way, I could say that we're talking about the elimination of the exploitation of non-human animals, but that is just a derivative of a broader philosophy that also applies to humans. You say, look, if you're just saying, it's like you're criticizing me somehow for saying something akin to, well, it seems, Alex, that you're just saying that therefore we should just like not exploit any being that has sentient capacity. It's like, yeah, that's exactly my argument. The point is this: it's one of consistency.
Okay. So there, he just said it again. He just said sentient being again. So, and I'm saying that I disagree with the sentient being portion. I've said that like 100 times. Like that, I think that fish are sentient, but I think that it's not morally wrong to eat them, or not morally wrong to purchase them in some kind of exploitative manner.
Right. I don't know if there's fish are ever used for.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, like there's fish like they use for. I know pills. Like vegans have to get different pills, or is that no? It's more. I guess that's pig intestine usually. So I was getting mixed up, but like there's probably. Yeah, I mean,
fish oil.
I would imagine that they use it for other things besides food.
Fish oil, like,
I don't know.
Different products, things like that. And I'm like, okay, but I disagree with that. And the fact is he just totally dropped it. He dropped the negative utilitarianism. He's not defending that there is any difference between them. He's saying, I think that a principle of negative utilitarianism is that we shouldn't exploit people, or exploit things, I should say. I don't know, exploit morally relevant beings. But then what is the difference between that and veganism? There isn't. I mean, there's no difference.
Yeah, it should just be a debate. Title is negative utilitarianism the right moral theory?
Right.
Like,
and then I would just come with a whole bunch of like arguments against negative utilitarianism then. But that's not what he said he wanted to debate. And there's proof that he's wrong, right? And I bring this up in my comment. There's proof that he's wrong. Because there are ethical vegans who are dietologists who believe that it's just wrong to in of itself to kill animals. Now,
even if it's not even if it's not like, are you talking about even if it's not sentient, like to kill ants?
Well, no, okay. So,
or are you saying, or to kill a fish who's sentient but not
even
doesn't have those other traits that you would count as morally relevant?
I think it depends on your position in Dientology. Like if you believe, like some of them think that it is wrong to kill ants, like Dientologically, at least on purpose, right? Mm-hmm. But my point is that if what he's saying is negative utilitarianism is equivalent to veganism, ethical veganism, I should say, and it doesn't just follow from it, because there's a difference, right? then how could that make it? How could ethical veganism also be equivalent with like deontology? Excuse me.
Right, he's excluding all vegans who aren't negative utilitarians.
Exactly.
Which is strange, but
Exactly.
I don't know.
All right.
Then you're going to have to name the reason or the justification for not affording that to other animals which can also experience suffering and cruelty, right? That's exactly what I'm saying. So if you turn around and say, look, your argument just says that we should be eliminating all exploitation, it's just negative utilitarianism. It's like, yeah.
He likes doing that too.
Okay, but that's not equivalent to ethical veganism, and I think we're just at an impasse here. That's not what I define as. I don't think that that's what the definition that the Vegan Society would agree with. I don't think that that's what most vegans use in their daily life to mean veganism. But
Well,
I would just have to disagree there, and I think that we should
I don't think we do. I don't think we do need to disagree. Let me just ask you this. Let's take the definition at face value. Let's say that the definition of veganism, it means to be an ethical veganism. You have to say that if an animal can be exploited and can experience cruelty, we have an obligation not to inflict it upon them. Do you agree with that statement?
So do I agree with it morally, or do I agree that that would be a definition of veganism?
Do you agree with that as a moral obligation, regardless of whether you think it's a good definition of veganism?
So just that they just feel pain and sensation? No,
if
I don't agree with that.
If an animal is capable of experiencing cruelty and exploitation, we have a moral obligation not to inflict it upon them. Do you agree with that?
I think exploitation is kind of vague. Can you expand that out a little bit?
Okay, fine.
How
Fine.
about that's a pretty
if an
normal
animal
request
is
to
capable
explain
of
what he means by it,
experiencing cruelty or suffering, let's say, if an animal is capable of experiencing suffering, we have a moral obligation not
Negative
to inflict it
utilitarianism.
upon it without good reason.
Okay. No. I don't think that
You don't
suffering
think
is
that's a
enough. I
moral
don't think that.
obligation?
Well, I don't think that pain is enough or suffering is enough. Right? That's what my second contention is going to be.
Okay, so what else is needed? Let's move on.
So are you doing like the kind of the name the trait type of argument then?
Well, that's not what I was doing there. But
He really
Oh,
wanted to say
that's what I
no
thought
there.
you were. That's what I
basically
thought
where
you
he
were
was going
doing.
with it.
we can do that if you like. That's fine because I've been.
I think he just really wanted to say no there. Like, it's clear that he was going in the direction of name the trait.
Yeah. He's like, well,
you
what
asked
else
and he
is
said no.
morally relevant? That's the name of the trade argument.
It's like, that's exactly what it is, but I don't know.
Oh well.
What do you think the trait actually is that makes a difference?
I think that pretty neatly like scoots into the second premise, right? I mean, second argument, the second contention. Like that, I think that not all animals are worthy of equivalent, or in some cases, any moral protection.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Okay. There are quite a few different traits. I think that the argument makes a lot of assumptions. Like, for one, it doesn't do any distinction between essential and accidental properties. And the original version of the argument wasn't even sound. Like, it had no identity of indiscernibles premise. But even if we go with, like, the sound version, it still makes a lot of assumptions. So, like the one I said about accidental and essential properties. And I think that there are a lot of different things that make us different from animals. Like, and there's a whole scale of different kind of animals have different characteristics which are more or less similar to us. So I'm going to give you four examples,
Sure.
four traits. So intentionality, capacity for moral reasoning, rationality, and kinship. Now, kinship, I'm just going to explain kinship. The rest are pretty easy, but I'm sure you understand them. So kinship is similar. When I talk about kinship, I'm talking about how we have more moral responsibilities to our offspring than we have to distant neighbors, or somebody like our distant evolutionary cousin, for example.
Okay.
And I think that if you remove those traits, you no longer have a human. So those are essential traits to be human. If you don't have any kinship, you don't have any intentionality, you don't have capacity for moral reasoning, you don't have rationality, I don't think you really are a human. I think that those are essential traits.
So a lot of people criticize me for this, and again, I'm gonna give you, because I know that you disagreed on the kinship one, but I think that, and something that I don't think that they realize is that Cosmic Skeptic probably doesn't value the mentally disabled very highly at all. I'm sure.
Yeah, like Peter Singer. Like, I read this article. They were interviewing Peter Singer, and they brought up, like, this is a few years ago, I don't know if his mom's still alive, but at the time, they said his mom was, like, very sick. She's using up resources, and they're like, so according to your philosophy, shouldn't you just, like, euthanize her and then give the money to charity? And he's like, he got all annoyed, but it seemed like a pretty, like,
seems like a reasonable
fair
question
if that's his philosophy. So then he got annoyed, but he basically said, yeah, I would if I could, but
yeah,
I'll try to find that article. But Yeah, so and he's like Cosmic Skeptic clearly influenced by Peter Singer, so
And I think that he would like
He's kind
agree,
of-
right? If there's just like this, because what if somebody is so mentally disabled that they don't really have sentience, like at least not to a significant extent, right? Wouldn't it be more ethical to, like, either not value their moral or ethical, responsibilities to them? And a lot of people like criticize me for like not caring about them, and at least in my argument, like you have to have if you have kinship, you still have some moral rights, right? So at least with kinship, you have something to protect you. But with suffering, if you lack the suffering, if you're like unconscious or in a coma, or you have like a mental disease that causes times where you can't feel anything, you have no moral rights at that point, at least under this kind of theory.
Yeah, so you're not saying it's okay to kill some sentient or not sentient. You're just saying because of kinship. Whereas he's saying, he doesn't say it, but I think he would say you could kill them. Maybe, I don't know.
I would think.
But like I'd be interested to hear his view. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear his view on abortion. Like I don't think he's ever said it, but because I know Peter Singer was like saying infanticide is permissible. So I'd be curious. I think he's kind of afraid to commit though, because he knows either way. If he says he's pro-choice, then the name the trait argument is going to be difficult for him. If he says he's pro-life, then most vegans are liberal, so that's not going to go well. So
True.
I think he's kind of afraid to commit to either one there.
And it's actually funny because Peter Singer isn't a negative utilitarian, which is funny that they're all.
Or is he
he's actually
preference?
a positive.
Well, then he changed. Didn't he change? I think it used to be classical, right, or something, or preference, and then he became. Or is it always? What is he now? You said
he is now a classical.
Positive.
He's now a positive, a utilitarian.
Is positive the same as classical?
Yeah, because classical tends to value both pain and pleasure, while like the negative don't care about pleasure at all.
So he's okay. And then, but Alex, seems to be negative utilitarian.
Yeah.
So okay, that's interesting. But yeah, at least like a classical utilitarian could say, even if a fetus isn't conscious, it will become conscious and increase the amount of happiness in the world. Whereas Alex can't really say that.
Right. Well, what the positive utilitarians say is that there's more positive utility in aborting the fetus than the pain that it would cause to the fetus, or like even if it's sentient, right? Like that's what they're arguing.
Right. I guess that's what Singer says. But at least he has more of a chance if he didn't want to say infanticide is permissible. He could make more of an argument. Whereas I don't think Alex really can.
Agreed.
Like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I wish, like, that's why I hope there's a second debate. There's so much more you can get into with, like, negative utilitarianism. Like, there's so much, like, I don't see why he can't say, like, if you imagine, like, in Infinity War when Thanos, like, kills half of all life.
Right.
If you imagine that decreased the net amount of suffering. Because if you imagine, even though it increases the suffering of the people who survived, it stopped all of those other people from suffering anymore. So if you imagine that decreased the total amount of suffering, according to negative utilitarianism, you have to say that was the right thing to do.
Right. It seems like
it still decreased the total amount of suffering.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring this up in my video that I'm going to post. But I was thinking about it, and it seems like your goal as a negative utilitarian should be like the biggest suicide cult leader in the world.
Yeah.
You should try to convince as many people to kill themselves as possible, basically.
Yeah. It might just be like if you take, I don't know if Alex is a negative utilitarian, maybe he realizes that if he does become that, no one's going to listen to him, so it's like he's kind of undercover.
Undercover.
I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, he doesn't want to admit it, but like, yeah, basically it is kind of like, does kind of turn into a suicide cult. If it's all just about eliminating suffering.
Precisely.
And also, yeah, even like if you take like the virus, like they might say like they would say if this virus can kill everyone, that would actually be a good thing.
Right.
As long as it's decreases the amount of suffering. So.
At least overall.
But yeah. What's that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying I agree.
Yeah, so just for the audience, Sterling he's making a video on negative utilitarianism, so I'll post that in the description once it's posted on his channel.
A human being who's severely disabled enough that they don't have those qualities is no longer human.
Those things you wouldn't even be a human if you didn't have those qualities. So how would you be a human if you had what would it mean to be a human without intentionality, capacity for moral reason? You would just kind of look like a human.
Well, you can say you want to have those things.
Like our kinship, because they don't originate from any human gametes.
Sure, so you once had those things.
You can't stop originating.
You once had those things,
right?
You're now
Exactly.
in coma, to the extent that you have none of them. Are you a human being?
I would still have a capacity. That's an accidental trait, not an essential trait.
You're not waking up.
But you still originate from a human
It's still
gamete.
accidental. It's accidental to who I am. It's not what I am essentially.
Sure,
like,
but
I did have them, so obviously, essentially, what it means to me is have the capacity. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you. I apologize.
No, I agree with that. It's an accidental property, but it's not a potential property anymore.
Does he
because
not
you
understand
don't have
like
the
the
potential for moral
accidental
capacity. It's gone. It's
essential
disappeared.
properties distinction?
Yeah, let's
Like,
pause. I think he does, but I think he's trying to avoid it by saying, well, okay, now you don't have those characteristics. Well, then I'm not me anymore. Like, I'm not, like, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I've lost everything that it meant to be me. Like, if I have no, okay, capacity. So the only way I could see that somebody really doesn't have any capacity for, like, intentionality, more reasoning, and just these three, we'll just go with these three. What was it? More reasoning, intentionality, and,
rationality?
might have been rationality. Yeah, I think it was. It's like if you removed my brain, like scooped out everything, and I was just like a zombie, like essentially, but
Not
not
really
even
you
a real,
anymore.
not like a pea zombie. Like I'd have nothing. I don't understand how I'm still me. I'm
Right.
like a skin
And-
fold that looks like a human.
Right. And if for the people who in the comments who were saying like, well then you're saying you can just kill them, but they still have kinship.
They would still have
They
kinship.
just seem to miss that point.
Yeah, exactly.
They're missing that point, and also it's an accidental property. But
And also,
yeah.
don't they like think? I mean, but don't most of them agree? Like, okay, so a lot of these people are in favor of euthanasia, right? So
right. Yeah.
most of them would agree that like you can
Yeah.
euthanize somebody who's like that would have no
Yeah.
brain at all, or like most of them would. I would
Right.
think.
It's strange they got so upset over that.
Yeah.
But
Because
but
it looks good. Right?
again,
Yeah, it looks
yeah.
good
But
to me.
even you weren't even arguing that it would be okay to euthanize them, but they still they missed the point and said you were, and I'm still surprised they got upset over it.
Oh well.
Are you any longer human?
I still would have kinship too. For one, there's not any way you can remove kinship. Kinship just means that you originate from human gametes, because human gametes are, yeah, exactly.
Well, that seems a bizarre trait to afford moral worth from.
Well, I actually did give you a reason.
Just the
for
fact that you
thinking
originate. Okay, well,
I gave you
run
a
it by me
reason.
again. Run it by me again.
So we have more moral responsibility to our offspring than to our neighbors, because we share greater kinships with them.
Okay, and the same is true across the animal kingdom,
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I agree. But there's like
Right.
even further, right?
So-
like I'm saying,
so
even
other-
the
so other
nearest
anim-
human relative is much further away than your neighbor.
No, but I
in
mean,
terms of-
so other animals do have that trait.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so then that's not a trait, because we're
It's not. But my point is in the beginning, right? Like when we talked about this, that I think that this is a continuum, right? Like I think that it's not a matter of, like I think animals to a more or lesser extent have rationality. For example, like it's not the same in humans as it is in animals, but it's like, it's a lesser extent. It's similarly like every step you go back, like you go to chimpanzees, they are closer related to us than a fish, a cow, a pig. And again, the further you get away, the less responsibility you have. And it's only one trait. It's like it's one among these four that I've selected. And so
Right.
my point is that the argument's not a valid argument. Like I don't think it's a good argument. I'm not going to agree that there actually are traits. What I'm saying is that even if I grant you that there is no one morally relevant trait that makes humans different from animals, that's just not relevant. I mean, it's not, because there are other reasons to consider the animals sufficiently different not to award them moral value. And it's the fact that they have such minimal amounts of these traits that they're not morally relevant. It's not morally relevant for them because they have very little amounts. Especially ants. Like, how are you going to argue that ants have any of those traits in a sufficient amount to substantiate moral relevance?
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I think he's trying to say, like, I'm saying that these are traits that only humans have, which is not true. I'm saying that these traits
saying
are
it's
a gradient. It's a gradient.
Right. Yeah. They're like it kind of makes it seem like it's binary. Like you either have it or
You don't.
you have all of it. But there's clearly you could be animals. Some animals could be conscious without being as conscious as us. So
Precisely.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
from other animals to the extent that we can treat the other animals how we like.
And what I'm saying is it's a spectrum, right? Animals have these traits to certain degrees. So I'm
Okay.
saying that the less they have this trait, there comes a point
sure.
where that they don't have any that they don't have any moral value at all. And
Okay, so
that's what I'm saying. So I'm
Yeah,
saying
but-
that some animals don't have any moral value because they lack these traits to such a significant degree.
yeah, that's fine, but look, I mean, all you're saying there is that some animals are worth more than others.
I'm saying that enough that you could kill them and eat them. Yeah, definitely.
Wait, but that's a whole nother jump. Because as you say, as you
Now
quite
he's
rightly point
starting
out,
to inject
I care more
Now
about
he's
my
starting to what?
family than I care about a stranger. But to say that I care about the stranger so much less that I'm able to put them in a gas chamber to eat their flesh seems a bit of a further step. I'm going to need a bit more from you to justify that kind of difference.
Okay, 2 points. 1 point, is that okay? Just because, so for example, if I were to tell you that last night I took a living being, I cut out its insides, and I put it into a saucepan until it made vaguely screaming sounds, right? That might disturb you. But if I told you it was a potato, it probably wouldn't disturb you very much. So let's not like, I mean, we use this kind of emotionalist language to try to to try to prompt a reaction. But you keep strawmanning me and saying that we're using a gas chamber to kill these pigs. You keep using the example of pigs, but why
I messed up
aren't you
there.
using the example of fish? Like I
You
think
know,
I messed up there. That was my fault. It's not that I misunderstood, but I misunderstood the force of the objection, right? Like, so what he's saying is that obviously, like, our neighbors, we can't put them in gas chambers. What I went into, I don't know why, because he said pigs so many times. I was like, I think I heard pigs. I went to pigs, so that was my fault. But there's an obvious difference, like I brought up in our discussion 5 minutes ago. The difference is a matter of scale, right? Like, it's not our neighbor; it's somebody that is far more distant than our neighbor, like by an order of magnitude. Like, so if you go to pigs, like, again, we're gonna grant his favorite animal, pigs. Pigs are so far away from us compared to the nearest great ape. I think we share, with every human person, we share, I think, 100% more DNA with another human person than we do with chimpanzees. So there's an empirical fact right there, right? We can go figure out what the actual amount is. But even that is such an insane amount compared to a pig, right? Like, compared to a fish. So my point is that even if I grant you, and I do, I mean, I grant that we can't put our neighbors and eat them, like we can't put them in gas chambers and eat them. But the amount of, if there is a gradient, right, into how much this matters, and it seems like there is, because we have how much we have with our close kinship versus our distant kinship. There is a clear, I don't know, it's so much less more responsibility for something for different animals, right? Like,
yeah, so I think kinship is still the trait I'm the most skeptical about being relevant, but I can see the point there. But,
and I wonder, like, but yeah. I mean, I can understand being skeptical of it. I'm just saying that it seems like it's a necessary trait to, for one, avoid the killing the mentally disabled.
Right, it is very useful for that, because Alex can't really give a reason to not kill the mentally disabled.
Right.
So.
And there is some intuitiveness. The intuitiveness is just like with our close kinship that we have more responsibility to them. Those are like the two intuitive points. I understand that, like, when you extend it out, it becomes hard to where you draw the line. I agree. It becomes hard when you draw the line. But I think we can draw the line at least fish, right? Like, can we understand that they're way further away than our son or our neighbor is? I mean, I think that seems at least somewhat intuitive.
Like, if you think of aliens that are, like, just as intelligent as us, they wouldn't have the kinship, but they would still have the other three.
True.
If they were. Yeah. So then, but yeah. They would still have moral value.
Yeah, they would.
Okay.
Any way that I can think of.
Right, because I'm trying to get you to agree with the principle of veganism. That's a separate argument from trying to get you to agree that that fish should fall under the type of animals which we think are capable of experiencing cruelty. That's a separate argument.
I don't think that that negative utilitarianism is equivalent to ethical veganism.
No, but look, you say something like, look, I think it would be ridiculous for someone to call themselves a vegan and to eat fish, and I would agree with you, but not because of the definition of veganism, but because I think fish are capable of feeling pain and are capable of experiencing cruelty. Therefore, the only thing that's kind of ridiculous about it is the attempt to exclude them from doing so. It's like you could turn around.
What would be the distinction between ethical vegetarianism and ethical veganism?
Well, the difference is that vegetarians seem to not actually care about the exploitation of animals. They care about the end result. They care about whether it's meat or whether it's a product. The life of a dairy cow is probably much worse than the life of a cow that's solely raised for meat or is killed at a young age for veal or something like that. Vegetarians.
Red herring, right? Like he's like, well, basically what he just said was, oh, well, I disagree with ethical vegetarians. I agree with the ethical vegans, right? My point was that their definition would be the same under his under his definition.
Yeah.
Like,
according to him, ethical vegetarians would be ethical vegans.
Yeah.
Because they're just saying that you can't. They still have. They're agreeing on what animals have. Or even if they're not agreeing on what animals have moral value, as long as they're
and I could
holding
even
on to
said
that
like
principle.
ethical pescatarian. That would probably be better.
Right, as long as you have that principle, and even if you disagree on which animals have moral value, for him it's all
the
they're
same.
still an ethical vegan then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Distinction between exploiting an animal for their flesh and exploiting an animal for their products. We as ethical vegans decide that the exploitation of animals for sensory pleasure is wrong, regardless of what the product is, regardless of what the sense is, regardless of what the animal is, as long as it's capable of experiencing cruelty. We do not have the right to inflict that cruelty upon them.
I would argue that vegetarianism, ethical vegetarianism, literally has no distinction except for the disagreement of the nature of exploitation. Like, literally, that you could follow the same philosophy and say you're an ethical vegetarian. A philosophy, a way of living that seeks to include, as far as practical possible, all forms of exploitation. Like, just stop.
Sure. Yeah, you could call yourself a vegetarian and say that I'm a vegetarian because I'm against the exploitation of animals, and I don't think that forcibly impregnating a cow and milking them is exploitation. It's like, okay, right, your problem there isn't the moral principle. Your problem is the definition of exploitation, right? In the same way that your problem, Sterling, is not with veganism, but with the moral characterization of particular animals, which is irrelevant to the point. What I'm trying to get you to agree with is the proposition that if an animal is capable of experiencing cruelty, we do not have the right to inflict cruelty upon them for no good reason.
Right. And I say that that's just not what veganism is. I could say
it is what veganism is, but he keeps using cruelty instead of suffering because it sounds better, and because I think it's because it makes it like cruel is a very like loaded word, right?
Right.
But if we just say suffering, which he agreed was like equivalent in like prior in the debate, we saw that clear distinction, right? The ethical pescatarian and the ethical vegetarian and ethical carnist or whatever, right? And we have no way to distinguish between these different views if they're all essentially equivalent under his argument. Yeah, like you're like negative utilitarianism, but you're a carnist because you think that only humans are relevant, right? It's like
right.
Pescatarian and a philosophy of way of living which seeks to include as far basically that's all I have to say. And I'm saying, well, no, I'm an ethical pescatarian, and then the debate is at its stop because we disagree about that nature of things. I mean, we have that, and then we have the other two premises that we haven't really touched too much. I mean, we touched the second one a little bit, but the veganism is completely arbitrary, and thus it can't be a moral obligation.
Well, I mean, tell me how this is. I don't think it gets any less arbitrary than this, right?
Right.
It's a basic principle, right? If you value an animal less, fine. If you value an animal more, fine. And you say things. You said earlier, you could be this kind of vegan, or you could be that kind of vegan. You could be. It's like, yeah, there are multiple ways to do the right thing, right? If we were arguing about whether or not God existed, and I said, yeah, but you could be a Christian, or you could be a Muslim.
I think he's just missing the point, and this goes on for a while.
It
takes a while to come up with his third religion.
Deistic
It's like, all right,
Buddhist
now
or
we're going to
something.
debate.
It's like, yeah, okay, but like, so what? That doesn't in any way affect the proposition of whether or not God exists. And in the same way, there are many ways of being vegan, but that doesn't in any way affect.
But there's no way
that it's wrong to exploit animals.
Okay, then you misunderstood my point. There's no way to draw the line at veganism because there are ways of life which go beyond veganism, like that seem to reduce suffering more. And so the question is, why say that veganism is the definition where the moral baseline is? Like, in order to do this, you have to be a good person. You have to have this moral obligation. Why is that the minimum amount? Like,
but you said, for example, somebody could be, a vegan who eats backyard hens, who eats backyard like chicken eggs or something. Yeah. It's like, no, right? Let's walk through this one. Okay. Let's try and set up a situation where you're a vegan who is trying to.
One of the problems is that he gets into the mud about these empirical examples, right? But it seems like, okay, so I guess I should let him finish his point. But I should say that if we're setting up like a thought experiment, like where somebody eats the eggs of the backyard hen, right? Okay, and he's gonna argue that like, okay, well they need calcium, so you need to feed them back their eggs, right? It's like, okay, you could supplement their diet with calcium. I don't really see why that's relevant. But the point is that there seems to be a disconnect between reducing suffering and completely abstaining from animal products in an ethical way, like, or believing.
Right, I don't understand, like, why doesn't he either commit to negative utilitarianism or to either, I guess, dietary veganism? Like, why can't he just say he's arguing for negative utilitarianism?
Yeah.
Because obviously there's going to be examples, like, where, even if they were just theoretical examples that weren't true, that didn't happen in real life, the point is, in that thought experiment, would it be okay?
Right.
And he just wants to kind of, I guess he's saying negative utilitarianism and ethical veganism are equivalent, but I don't think you can say that without redefining ethical veganism.
Right, in terms of, yeah, exactly.
Full tweet backyard X. Okay, where'd you get the hens from?
Right, so you purchased them from somewhere. I get it. Okay. Yeah, you
Right,
purchased
so
them.
that's a problem in itself. They're still being grown in battery farms, and someone's still making money off the back of the suffering of those animals. Secondly, how many eggs?
Okay, wait a minute. Time out. So, if you did take that away from them, right, you're reducing the suffering of that individual chicken because it doesn't have to live. One, it doesn't have the possibility of going to someone else who would abuse it. So it seems like that would reduce more suffering. Two, you're taking it out of the condition in which it is clearly suffering.
Yes.
So you're taking it out of the situation. It's similar to rescuing almost in that case. Or what about a rescue? What if you rescue the hen? How about that? Let's make it a rescued hen rather than a purchased hen, for example.
Thank you for preempting my exact argument. Because of course, if you're taking an animal for its own sake, then of course, like, you still shouldn't be buying it, right? If you're handing over money to somebody who's growing hens in a battery farm, it makes nonsense of the concept of economic supply and demand to say that by buying that product you're somehow eliminating the suffering or minimizing the suffering. No, you're contributing to a demand. They're going to go and get more chickens. They're going to go and breed more chickens. So the only way that it would be okay.
We didn't really touch on this at all, but we should have. I don't think. Again, this is a whole other argument he needs to make, that that breeding practices are wrong. Like, that you can't breed
whatsoever, or to be in a factory farm.
Well, because I don't know what the distinction is going to be here, because factory farming, like, where people get their animals, right, can be in, they're all breeding programs. Nobody buys them from factory farms. Nobody buys chickens from factory farms to raise at their house.
Yeah.
Right? So he's going to have to argue that all breeding is wrong at some point. Like, and I
mean, he's basically an antinatalist, I guess.
Yeah. Well, at least, but all breeding animals, not just humans too. I agree with you, right? But he's like, but my point is that he's gonna have to argue that all breeding of animals is wrong, like, and that seems like another step, right? Like, you know.
Yeah, I still don't understand. Like, if there's a cow that's raised on a farm, it gets to, like, walk around. It's not artificially inseminated or anything. I don't see why he's saying that cow's life is not worth living. That it shouldn't even be created. Right. It seems like he's saying there's no.
But even if it is artificially inseminated, what makes that wrong? What makes that wrong?
Right, it depends on, like, how much suffering it's causing. I don't know what kind of suffering a cow experiences when that happens, but
I doubt it. I doubt in most situations the cow is suffering from artificial insemination. I mean, like, I'm.
As far, like, because you're imagining it happening to a human. I don't know. Yeah, we can't really know.
Well, and humans sometimes are artificially inseminated, right? And people don't, like, most people don't raise an outrage over it. Like, the idea is, like, the only way you could object to it is if you have, like, this idea of consent for animals, which I'm not even sure how that works.
Right, like, I still think, obviously, you have to say that, like, obviously bestiality is wrong, but in terms of, I'm trying to think of other examples that would involve consent. Right, because you can't, it's a case where you can't really get consent, so it's hard to know. Like, with a dog, like, can you raise a dog as a pet if you can't get the dog's consent to be a pet?
Right.
But it seems like dogs are happy as pets, so I don't.
Yeah, I wouldn't really
see how the fact that you can't get consent. It's more, as long as you can believe, as long as it's as far as you can tell, a very high chance that they will be happier as a pet, or at least not significantly less happy.
Right.
I don't know, to say that.
I don't know if we have a moral responsibility. I mean, I'm not a consequentialist, right? So I don't know if we do have a moral responsibility to do that. But I just don't see how you can prove that the artificially insemination is a morally wrong thing, right? Like, and like you said. So just taking your example, like, we get most people get their dogs neutered, right? But the dog doesn't consent to that.
Yeah, people don't, like, throw a riot over that.
Yeah, nobody throws a riot over getting their dogs neutered. There's no way the dog can consent to that. Or maybe it probably wouldn't consent to that if it could, right?
Right, that's a good point. I never even thought of that.
And it's not going to make the dog suffer to have children. Anyway. It makes you suffer, right? Like, you have to deal with the dog puppies if they have puppies, right? So it's more like, out of inconvenience for you rather than
Right.
anything
Yeah.
else.
I mean, I guess most vegans are against pet ownership, but at the same time, they might say they should be neutered so that they can't reproduce, because then there's going to be more animals that are hurt. But then it's like, so then they can be a deontologist and say it's always wrong to neuter a dog. But then it's like they're switching, because it seems like he kind of switches back and forth between negative utilitarianism and deontology. Because then later he's like saying things like it's wrong no matter, even if it doesn't cause suffering.
Right.
So with like, I guess, yeah, he's implying that the artificial insemination does cause suffering, but I don't know. It's also the case, like, do you just assume it causes suffering? Like, how do you know? How do you make that calculation there? But I mean, I would still prefer if they didn't artificially inseminate the cow. It seems like they could just let it mate.
Well,
naturally,
most of the time
but...
it can't, because what will happen is that the bull will hurt the cow.
Oh, so it's actually safer.
Yeah, it's safer. That's the reason why they do it. They don't do it because they like to artificially inseminate cows. I mean, it's just that it's safer. It causes less problems. Like, you don't get...
That's true. I never even thought of that. Like, if it can get hurt from actually mating, then...
I mean, cows are big, right? Like, they're really big animals.
Yeah, so artificial insemination doesn't sound so bad now.
I mean, and also that you eliminate, like, all the possibility. If you think that artificial insemination is wrong for animals, which you might, like, let's just pretend I agree with you, right? And say that that's wrong. Well, then you eliminate all the conservation efforts for endangered animals. Because you...
Right, they're not naturally
mating most of the time. Like, the vast majority of the time, they have to figure out some kind of artificial insemination to keep the species alive. And so that would be ethically wrong, it seems like, to me, if you think that the artificial insemination of cows is wrong. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I guess a lot of vegans would just say, let the animals go extinct. I don't know.
Maybe, probably. I mean...
Depends. I mean, it depends on the... Yeah,
they're going to lose the support of a lot of ecological organizations, but yeah, I guess so.
Right. Who knows? Yeah. But it depends on their moral theory.
Okay, so you saved them from that situation. How many eggs? How many eggs? How many eggs are they laying?
I don't know. I don't know how many.
Because I'm sure you're aware. I'm sure you're aware. So 2 a week. So
let's pretend.
104 eggs, which might be about right. Because these hens are genetically engineered because of the way that they've been grown, such that they'll grow such that they'll lay eggs more.
What's that?
This is
more than
irrelevant.
In
the wild.
Yeah.
In the wild, chickens would lay maybe about
really
12
went
eggs every year.
Example
right?
Here.
Yeah.
And you've got a chicken here laying 104 eggs per year. Now, what kind of problems does that bring about? Firstly, having an egg is like having a period for a chicken, right? So it's not a comfortable experience. Second thing is, a lot of chickens experience osteoporosis because the calcium that's needed for their bone structure is redirected to the eggs. So common practice across sanctuaries, and what you should be doing if you've rescued a chicken and it's laying this many eggs, you should be feeding the eggs back to the chicken, right? That's the standard practice. In other words, if you save the chicken, but you're not doing it for its own sake, you're doing it so that you can eat its eggs, you're still contributing to the suffering of that chicken.
Okay.
And you shouldn't...
This is just hilarious, because he's taking this example and he's running with it with all these irrelevant things, right? Okay, again, just to break his example, right? Okay, I'm supplementing the diet with enough calcium so that it doesn't need to eat the freaking eggs, and I can eat the eggs. It would cause me more pleasure to eat those eggs than and I'll supplement the chicken's diet so that it doesn't have to worry about calcium deficiencies. I'm sorry.
Right.
You know. Okay, now what is your counter example? You know what I mean?
Right. It's like, and I think he's kind of missing the point. Like, it's not about, it's the theory behind it. Like, we're saying, are there situations where it's okay to not be a vegan?
Yeah.
And it's like it seems like his goal is just for every example you come up with to think of a way that it's wrong. But it's like,
yeah, there are ways it could be wrong, right? But we're specifying on that it doesn't cause any more suffering, right?
Right.
And it doesn't seem like it does.
Now it's like,
I mean,
yeah, I don't see what is. Yeah, I don't see, like, if you're supplementing the chicken's diet, I don't see why it's wrong if you're treating it well.
Or what about this? So we can go into this, right? Let's pretend that I have this chicken, right? And I'm not feeding back its eggs, okay? I'm eating the eggs, and I make sure it has a good diet. So but I don't especially take care of its calcium, so it ends up having some osteoporosis problems, right? But what Alex does is, so he doesn't eat any animal products. He doesn't own any animals, nothing like that. But his products that he sells on his website, let's pretend, I don't know this for a fact, but a lot of people, products that he buys, for example, actually were made in sweatshops, unknowingly to him, right? Like, but it causes more suffering, in fact, right?
Yeah.
How can he say that that those kind of suffering are like less relevant or like less contributor to the moral baseline than eating a rescued hen's chicken eggs. Right.
It's like it seems like he's saying that veganism is the ultimate moral goal.
Yeah.
And everything else falls short of it. So there's nothing that can be worse than buying an animal product.
Yeah, exactly. Or eating an animal product. I mean, like having like he's the one. He's starting to go onto the side of eating animal products now. Now he's saying like, oh wait a minute, maybe like he's saying that eating the eggs would be wrong. So then it seems like he is committing to dietary veganism, right?
Right. So it's like I don't know why he just wouldn't commit to dietary veganism in the first place. It seems like when it's convenient. It's just like when it was when you're discussing the second contention, he wasn't with dietary veganism, but now he's back to it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And yeah, and then I guess, and I know you understand this, but like I think that he's completely missing the point that all these like things, all these like different types of eating styles cause more or less suffering on a gradient. Like, and it doesn't seem like we can pinpoint where the moral baseline is. Like, where is just enough suffering, enough? Like, and again, we're going to run into suicide, like you said. Like, we're going to run into these antinatalist kind of suicide positions eventually, where we should just make everybody kill themselves, or tell them to kill themselves, or click the button, or whatever kind of stuff.
Or like the button. Yeah.
Well, I mean, telling people to kill themselves doesn't seem any less wrong. I mean, if you just think reducing suffering or trying to
if you're not like if you imagine like an antinatalist who just like says it in a way like, according to my moral theory, it'd be good if you killed yourself.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's basically, it sounds like that's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I would agree.
According to their moral theory, that's what they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
Because it's laying so many eggs that it's living a very uncomfortable experience. You can do your best to mitigate that by not eating its eggs, by feeding its eggs back to it, and not breeding it, right? So the best you would have on your plate, the very best, would be you save a chicken, right? You save a chicken, you don't eat its eggs, and then you don't breed it, right? That to me is that is what sanctuaries do, right? We're no longer talking about the consumption of animal products. We're no longer talking about kind of your next door neighbor going and getting some eggs, right, to make an omelet. We're talking about a sanctuary. We're talking about the saving of animals for their own sake and the elimination of their suffering, right? So it's not as arbitrary as you think. In other words, if you say, I'm going to be a vegan and I'm going to have a backyard hen, it's like that backyard hen is still suffering and you're still responsible for its suffering.
What makes that so much more morally relevant? I mean, like, it seems like the amount of reduction of suffering you're doing by not eating, like, any animal products besides those eggs would surely outweigh any suffering you're doing to the chicken, especially if you don't eat all of its eggs. Let's say that you just eat half of its eggs. So it seems like it's just arbitrary on where you decide to draw the line. So like, and what's like, you went on one side, right, for gathering the eggs for food, right?
Yeah.
What about on the other side, for veganism, for example, or like barcatting all animal-based products and companies that profit in any way from animal use?
I think that's going to be the problem. Like, and we're going to run into it again. He's going to go into like this silly example about Burger King having like a vegan product, right?
KFC, right?
Yeah, KFC or something like
vegan
that.
Burger. He really likes his KFC vegan burger, so he's going to find a way to justify getting it.
Right, and it seems like to me, like, your one purchase of that vegan burger or whatever, like, you're supporting an entire industry, like fast food, that provides thousands of chickens, and you know what I mean? And it seems like that doesn't outweigh like them putting a few vegan options on their menu, right?
Yeah, I think his argument is that if enough vegans buy the vegan options, then KFC will realize to buy more, but it's just not a very plausible argument. I don't see... I mean,
even if they put like more vegan options on the menu, does that really outweigh all of the putting money into the pockets of people who, according to his theory, systematically abuse animals, like systematically create thousands of meals and expand locations? What if your one purchase like indirectly contributes to them building another KFC in another area, which causes
that's a good point. If you give them your business, they might open more stores. I never even thought of that. So yeah, it's like it seems like he really wants to justify getting the vegan burger there, but like it seems like a deontologist would have to say it's wrong. At least most would, because you're putting money in the hands. Like, they would just say that's a rule. You can't give money to KFC.
Right.
But if he's a negative utilitarian, I guess his argument is that if enough vegans buy the vegan options, KFC will realize that and get more vegan options.
Or they could just expand their business and sell.
But that's like, it's a big risk, and like, I guess he's saying his decision, if he used decision theory, is telling him it's okay to buy them, but like, it just seems like a huge risk when you're. I don't see how a vegan could give KFC money.
Yeah.
But he really wants the vegan burger, I guess.
Yeah, I love these vegan burgers. But we're gonna get caught in the weeds a couple times here on empirical like examples, because it kind of sucks. I mean, it sucks because he wants to go into like these empirical examples, which have nothing to do with the theory.
Theoretical.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Oh well. Okay.
Isn't that required? It would reduce more suffering. Or being a locavore vegan, for example, you purchase only foodstuffs from your immediate area, where it doesn't have to be traveled, thousands of miles, possibly killing bugs, possibly killing rodents, for example. And
the audio.
Yeah.
Oh, this is where he. Do you remember what he was saying here?
I don't remember what he was saying.
Yeah.
Oh, he said.
Okay.
He's saying you kind. I think.
Sure.
There were two questions there, and I'm afraid
Oh,
I've
okay,
forgotten the
okay,
first
I think I
one.
remember now.
You'll have to run it by me again.
Well, I think it was just one question. It's just that, why isn't it morally required to go, to the next level of reducing suffering, right? Like, so it seems like there's other principles that are not veganism, or at least not what I would define as veganism, that go above and beyond, like freeganism, or something like, boycotting all animal-based products. And no matter what, not animal-based products, but like all products and companies that profit in any way from animals. It seems like you're drawing the line at veganism for an arbitrary reason.
Okay, there were two questions, and I remembered
okay.
the first one. It wasn't a question though. That's why I
Was this James or you?
I was wrong to phrase it as such. You
He's
said
referring to.
surely it would be better.
About what?
Was he referring to James? James asked two questions, or you asked two questions?
I asked two questions. I didn't ask two questions. One was a statement, and I think he's going to respond to that, and then in a question. I think if I remember correctly, what James said was that we were running out of time, and that we should try to wrap up some points. And yeah, I think that's what he said, or that we should move on from something, and that we like that.
Was this supposed to only be an hour total for the debate?
It's pretty flexible. He told when we started talking, he said. An hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half, I think, for debate, and or he might have said an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. I can't recall exactly. And 30 minutes for questions.
Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like we quite got to that.
Because if you're eating hens from a backyard farm, that's far better than the suffering that would be included in factory farming. It'd be better to get eggs from there than to get eggs. It's like. Yeah, sure. There are better and worse ways to do an immoral thing, right? Like, it would be better for me to mug a homeless person than to mug and stab them.
These examples
right? But
are
neither
so
are morally
frustrating. It's
permissible.
like he's missing the
I
point.
could say, yeah, but if I just mug them and push them away, think about how much suffering I'm saving by not stabbing them. It's like, these are both things that you are doing by choice that you don't have to do. So you don't get to say something like, but look how much suffering that I'm saving. Look how much good I'm doing by, limiting the amount that I'm exploiting animals when I don't have to. It's like everything that you do towards the exploitation of animals unnecessarily and inflicting cruelty upon them. Everything you do is a bonus immorality, right? You don't get to kind of reduce that to half, still be committing an immorality, and kind of rest on the laurels on the fact that you've reduced yourself. So a reducitarian, as you say,
I thought we were talking
would
about veganism.
still be in a moral
going backward.
gutter to say, well, look, I've made some progress. It's like, well, good. Well, you better keep going so that you can meet your moral obligation, right? You don't get to kind of sit back and rest on that. But also on your point it seems like you've misunderstood the concept of a boycott when it comes to something like animal products, right? What would this involve, right? So I'm no longer going to go and shop at Waterstone's bookshop to buy my books because they have a cafe that serves milk in its coffee, right? Because I need to boycott any industry that relies on animal exploitation. I'm going to drop out of university because we just opened a new library that uses leather seating, right? This would be absurd. Not only would it be
like later on, he's going to say veganism might be a moral obligation. So it's like right now he's saying that's too absurd, but then later he's saying it might.
Right.
No matter how absurd it is, it's still a moral obligation.
Yeah, and this is what he was trying to bite the bullet earlier in the debate. We talked about this last time. He's like, well, maybe it is a moral obligation. I should just donate, but I'm not. But then okay, well, why is this absurd? That's not absurd, right?
Yeah.
So one thing's absurd and one is one is reasonable because of arbitrary reasons, right? Because he decides one's absurd. And I have so I think that they're both absurd. They're both kind of crazy. But I'm not a consequentialist. I don't know, maybe if I was committed to consequentialism, I probably think that I would have to be committed to both. To all of them.
Freeganism.
Yeah, I think suicide is the
giving all your money to charity.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a negative utilitarian would say, As long as I can reduce the amount of suffering, I can keep living. But if I ever reach the point where I'm increasing the amount of suffering, then I commit suicide. I don't know. I guess that's what naive
How do
people
you
are trying
how
to
do you
say.
judge that though? Like,
Right, it's like that whole moral uncertainty.
yeah, definitely.
I don't know.
Okay.
But at least we don't have to make those decisions.
Yeah, thank God. Whew, not a utilitarian. Thank God. Okay.
Point. It might be to say, see, it would be absurd to try and eliminate the suffering to the highest extent. No, the reason it's absurd is because it's self-contradictory, right? It's actually not in my best interest. If we've got a company that is exploiting animals, but also has products that are not exploiting animals, not only do we have a moral permissibility to shop at that place, let's say, for instance, the KFC burger or something that they just brought out, the vegan burger. I don't know if they've done that in the States. But they've got it here. And a lot of people
really
say,
love it.
no, we need to boycott products. We need to boycott companies that rely on animal exploitation. It's like, you've got a company here that is exploiting animals and has a product where it's not exploiting animals, right? And if we show that we are contributing to a demand for products that don't exploit animals, especially when a lot of the people buying that product are people who are on the fence and who would have still gone into KFC, may well afford a chicken burger, but now think they'll try the vegan burger, you're signaling to that company that the world is changing and that they should be doing more to accommodate veganism, right? So not only is it like, well, I think it's permissible to shop at a company that
Vegans have to go to KFC.
Yeah, they have to. It's a moral obligation.
It's a moral obligation to go to KFC.
You have an obligation to do so, right? If you want to be.
Is he saying vegans should go to KFC
Oh, yeah.
and buy the vegan burger?
Oh yeah, you have a moral obligation to buy that vegan burger, Mr. Vegan.
Okay.
That's absurd for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, like, it's absurd because of the reasons why I talked about before. Like, you don't know that purchase is going to encourage them to have vegan options. It seems like you're just giving money to people.
But yeah, it's like you can like. Right. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm fine. You know what I'm gonna say.
It's like, so if he's using decision theory and he's saying he thinks it's gonna be better, but it's like he's the one making the judgment, so he could just like fudge the numbers and like make himself think that it's gonna be good in the long run. But it's like, you get more KFC if you get all vegans to go to KFC, they might just open more KFCs and support more factory farms.
Exactly, and the fact that there's vegan options, right? It's not like it's not like you can make almost anything a vegan option. You just don't order the meat parts of it, right? And that doesn't really encourage them to have. I don't even know what the point is. It's not like they're going to serve less chicken. I mean, like, it might be a comparatively less amount, but like it would still be a significant amount of chicken. It would be so much more that you're not fulfilling your obligation by having that, right? Like, it's because it causes so much suffering out of proportion with the small amount of reduction that you would have, right?
So is he saying that if they have more vegan options, then more people will switch to buying the vegan options? Like, I guess that's his argument, but it's just like it's a big risk when they could open more KFCs, and it's like it seems like if that's such a big risk, you should err on the side of caution and not encourage vegans to go to KFC.
Right.
I would say that seems like the natural conclusion to me, but yeah. Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's correct.
By doing so, you are signaling that the world is changing, and you're actually contributing to the spread of veganism and the normalization of veganism too. So if you say, like, this is arbitrary because you could be a reducitarian, you could be someone who boycotts industries of animal exploitation altogether, it's like, no.
Yeah.
The only reason that seems
increasing
arbitrary
the normalization versus contributing suffering. If you contribute suffering but you increase the normalization, is that valid?
Because someone who is boycotting all of these industries,
or you tell people that you're vegan,
but they're not
you tell people you
that
lie,
like,
and you indirectly
like
increase the normalization.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder what vegans would say about saying you're vegan. What if they want people who aren't vegan to lie about being vegan to normalize it?
It seems cruelty and exploitation to animals. We should avoid it, right? And whichever way you want to do that, that's fine. But these other areas, these other areas that you're using to kind of imply that there's some arbitrariness to this about like reducitarians or backyard hens or boycotting, they are to miss the point.
Okay, so I'm gonna disagree. Obviously, this seems like the kind of So if we agree that boycotting all companies that profit in any way from animal use would reduce suffering because you're disrupting their profits, it seems like you do reduce harm by a lot. And let's say that you don't do it with companies that have like vegan options, for example, let me rephrase it this way: have exclusively vegan options, only incidentally vegan options. Like, they're vegan just because incidentally they're vegan. They have some products that don't have animal products by incident. It doesn't seem like you have justification for shopping with them at all.
Right. We can touch the veganism because he mentioned it there just a little bit. And then he'll probably explain more, but just to touch it. So he says,
Hmm.
like, the problem is that it's distinct, right? Like, these options are all distinct. And I talk about that a little bit here. Like, if I refuse to, like, support these, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember my point. I apologize. Well, here, let's just touch the freeganism because that's easier to remember. Right, freeganism reduces more suffering, but it doesn't necessarily exclude any animal products, because you could just get all the meat you get from stuff that's thrown out, right?
Yeah, roadkill or
Yeah, or not just roadkill, but like any like donated food, right? And then we do have this like problem with dietary veganism at least. Now the locavore hypothesis would include some animal suffering, because you could have like somebody who hunts on very like small amounts of land, like like rabbits or deer or whatever, and it seems like they might be causing a lot less suffering than like avocado farming or almond farming, which does cause quite a bit of suffering to quite a bit of animals, especially when they're transported so far, killing tons of bugs, tons of which some vegans think are relevant bugs. Rodents too, though. Rodents most vegans think are relevant, and they get killed quite a bit by these industrial farming practices. And so let's say that it requires, I don't know, like I have one like deer, right? So I'm a locavore, and I hunt for my meat, but I have like one deer every 3 months, or maybe one deer every 4 months, and I freeze the meat, right? I think that you could argue that the vegan who regularly eats like almonds and avocados and all these kind of very extensive industrial products that have like a really high death toll on bugs and on marmots and rodents and things like that, you could argue that they're causing more suffering in a lot of ways. And the question becomes like, well, where do you draw the line then? Like, why is that one more morally a obligation than the or like even veganism without those options? Like, you can't have almonds and avocados, for example. Like, so
there's some vegans who say you can't have almonds or avocados.
Yeah.
I guess because of that reason.
yeah, exactly.
Because they. I guess those would be like the freegans or the locavores.
Yeah, the locavore vegans. And so it's not really contained to just a vegan definition. It's not just a vegan definition. It's like it's something beyond veganism. Why is that not the obligation? It's distinct. It's distinct enough that we can make two definitions, right? Like the animal products and these other foodstuffs, like these vegetables, or like other products, as it were. Oh, anyway, that's my point.
Kind of dropped the point on freeganism, for example. It seems like freeganism completely would be just straightforwardly a more morally would reduce more suffering, and I don't think that it's entailed by ethical veganism. I think that it goes above and beyond ethical veganism, and I don't see why we're not required to do freeganism if we're required to do veganism. It seems like it just straightforwardly. It just seems like it straightforwardly follows from those premises. And similarly with the locavore vegan, I think that if we're required to do veganism, we're required to get our animal products, or not our animal products, our products from places that are closer, because it would reduce the suffering, in fact, of sentient creatures. And so my argument essentially is that when you say that veganism is the moral baseline, then nothing else prevents enough suffering to be a moral obligation. It's just arbitrary that you pick that that's the point where we have to stop, that's the point where we have the moral baseline, and any more reducing suffering is not sufficient, or any less would be not sufficient, and any more would be super negatory. And I don't think we haven't really touched it in a while.
Yeah,
we still haven't addressed what would make an action above and beyond the Call of Duty. Is there anything?
Well, look, Sterling, I'll address your first point first.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, look at what you just said. You said that I think something like freeganism is not entailed by ethical, or is not kind of part of ethical veganism. It goes above and beyond it. It's like, okay, sure, but that makes it a different issue. We're discussing ethical veganism and whether that's an obligation. To say something like, but then surely you have an obligation to go further and accept this other moral proposition. Like, okay, fine, we can discuss that if you like. Like, that may be true. You may say something like, if you're a vegan, on the principle that you're not in favor of cruelty towards people who can, or individuals and people who can suffer, that you shouldn't be a racist. And imagine I was arguing with someone.
So he's missing the point. So we're saying, if whatever moral theory gets you to veganism, it seems it would also get you to freeganism, for example.
Yeah.
And so he's saying that's possible, that's true, but he's not a freegan. And if he's saying it's possible that freeganism is a moral obligation, it seems like he should be thinking about that more.
True.
Instead of just dismissing it and saying it's possible. It's like, if you're not doing it, but you're saying it could be a moral obligation, why aren't you...
Well,
it seems like you either have to prove it's not a moral obligation or just keep thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
And
right,
then
and it wouldn't be...
freegan.
The problem is that if that were true, you wouldn't be morally obligated to be a vegan. You'd be morally obligated to be a freegan.
Right, because they can still eat, like, deer that are from...
Right, it's like...
Or if it's given to them, or...
It's like saying, like, I'm morally obligated to not be a racist against only black people. But no, that's not true. I'm morally obligated to not be a racist at all. That's the more relevant, like, thing. It's like, it's not that I'm just morally obligated to, I'm not morally obligated to not be racist to just black people. I'm morally obligated to not be racist at all. That's the relevant, distinction, right? It's not like, so what I'm saying is that you can't say somebody has a moral obligation to veganism, because the truth is they have a moral obligation to freeganism. And freeganism is not the same thing as veganism. Like, they aren't included in each other. So it's not like freeganism goes, like, how do I say this? You could be, for example, a freegan that is not a vegan. And again, or a locavore. Locavore is another example. I think it's even more relevant, right? I think it's even, because you can show, like, possibly less suffering on a non-vegan locavore type of ethical position.
Right.
At least it's like intelligible. You could see why maybe that the suffering was less. And so, like, which would be the obligation then? Would it be the locavore? It seems like the locavore has less suffering, but they're not a vegan. So where's the line? It seems arbitrary. You just decide where it feels better to you.
I think, he feels comfortable going vegan, but he doesn't want to go freegan or locavore, so that's where he draws the line.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. We're at 103.12. We can keep
12.
going a little bit, I think. If he touches on anything else, I don't know if we get repetitive from here or not.
Right, okay.
Let's go.
Okay.
Your logic should stop you being a racist. It's like, okay, yeah, probably right, actually. Yeah, true, great, we'll have that discussion. But that in no way has anything to do with the conversation about veganism. It seems like what you're almost doing is agreeing implicitly by saying something like, but what about these arbitrary notions like freeganism, which go above and beyond veganism? It's kind of like you saying, well, okay, I get the veganism thing. Yeah, sure. Veganism, ethical veganism at a base level is a moral obligation. But what about these other things? Are they moral obligations? Well, I don't know. But, like, as you point out yourself, they are separate issues, right? We're not talking about freeganism. Okay. We're not talking about boycotting.
I'm asking you
what
principle. No, I'm asking you what principle would allow you to get to veganism that doesn't get you to freeganism, that doesn't get you to locavore freeganism, vegetarianism. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying that any principle that you're going to apply for an argument for veganism is going to extend to further beyond veganism, so that and I don't think that. And so, for example, those things are not the same thing.
Yes.
So, in order
it's
to
like
be,
he doesn't want to agree, but he
ethical,
realizes he has to.
a freegan,
Right.
or an ethical.
So there's about 5 minutes left in the debate. Sterling and I talked, and we said we didn't really think any new material was covered. It was kind of just talking in circles at this point. So we're going to leave out the last 5 minutes. The link to the original video is in the description, so you can check out the last 5 minutes if you want. But I'm just going to let Sterling summarize his closing statement.
All right. So basically, the essential problem is that we couldn't get down to what makes a vegan, essentially, right? What makes a vegan distinct from an ethical vegetarian or an ethical pescatarian? And that runs into everything, or an ethical, like, freegan, for example. And since we couldn't get to that point, that it made the debate run in a circle. But he never said why he thought that fish were morally relevant. So that means he really didn't address my second point. Like, he never said why certain animals are morally relevant and why certain animals aren't. Or why they're all morally relevant, for example, he could have argued. He didn't actually... He just kind of bait the bullet on the veganism being, like, a supererogatory action. Like, he just kind of said, well, actually, we're obligated to all actions that possibly reduce suffering. Which we could have gone into a debate about that. I could have just, there are absurd conclusions that we kind of mentioned in this analysis. But but I don't really see, I don't think that it's plausible. I think that it's implausible to believe that anyway. Just for, beyond the conclusions, I mean, beyond the fact that you might have to commit suicide, There are other things that are bad about it. And the arbitrariness, I think that on the arbitrariness, it was just a matter of him saying that actually we probably do need to be freegans, but he's not.
But he's not.
But he's not.
But it's like, don't call it a moral obligation then if you're saying it might be a moral obligation, but he's not going to think about it.
Yeah.
He's just going to say it might be, but I'm not.
Pretty much.
Then don't call it a moral obligation.
Pretty much. Yeah. And he actually, I don't think one of the the major showing points, I think, and the most relevant parts to pay attention to is where he says, well, he doesn't really give us a good reason to not boycott all of, these animal things, all these animal places.
Like KFC.
Yeah, his university is an example he used, and you can.
Yeah.
It seems like it goes against your interest, but you're a negative utilitarian. You're just about reducing suffering. You're not about maximizing pleasure. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if he wants to reverse his position, become just a regular utilitarian, which is possible, it would change the whole analysis.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so it seems like he kind of said, that's absurd. We don't have to do that, but then other times he said veganism might be a moral obligation, regardless of how absurd it is.
Yeah. So. And also, if it's based on our interests, it seems like we got to do it's more in my interest to eat a certain amount of meat. It seems like it would play to my interest more. So, again, we're gonna go around on that. Is it really more pleasure for me to eat meat than it would cause the suffering? I don't know, but that's another wrinkle if you're going to believe that, right? If there is a possibility. Right. But yeah.
Right. If you think of hunting or some case where the animal is killed as painlessly as possible, are you really going to argue that tiny bit of pain can't be outweighed by any pleasure? So.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that covers the debate. So thank you, Sterling, for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
So all the links are in the description, and I have some more discussions coming up. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.